Show you how to bind off. I'm on the knit side of my fabric. I've got my purls in the back, and I have found I've never tried to bind off in a purl direction, so I don't know if it's common to bind off in a purl direction or if that happens sometimes in patterns. I'm a newer knitter, so I haven't experienced trying to learn how to bind off in a purl direction. But how I know how to bind off is in a knit direction. So I've got my tail on the right side, my working yarn on the right side. We're ready to knit across. I'm going to insert my needle knitwise, knit 2 stitches, then after I've knit 2 stitches and I have 2 stitches on my right hand needle, I'm going to take the stitch in the back, insert my needle underneath, or insert my left needle underneath of that right stitch, or the farthest right stitch. I'm going to lift it over the needle, or the stitch in front, and take it off of the needle. That's my first bound off stitch. So I'm going to knit another stitch again. So I have 2 stitches on my right hand needle. When I have 2 stitches on my right hand needle, I'm going to take my left needle, put it underneath of the stitch on the back side of the right needle, and move it over the top of the front stitch and take it off of the needle. That's my second bound off stitch. Again, knit another stitch, take the back stitch, move it over the top of the stitch in front, and take it off of the needle. Insert, knit 2 stitches on the right needle, take the stitch in back, move it over the top of the front stitch and remove. Insert, knit, take the back stitch, move it over the top of the front stitch and remove it from the needle. Insert, knit, back stitch comes over the top of the stitch in the front and off the needle. Sorry, my yarn's curling up. Knit, back stitch comes over and off the needle. Knit, back stitch goes over the front stitch and off the needle. Knit, back stitch goes over the front stitch and off the needle. See how that goes? Over the front stitch and off the needle. We'll just continue doing this until we get to the last stitch. And I'll show you. Oh no, it fell off. Hang on, let me go backwards. I got my front, I got my knit stitch. Okay, see how I put that back on? So I put immediately my needle back through the stitch that's bound off. This is a bound off stitch from before. The working stitch goes back through the right needle. But this needle, or this stitch, the yarn fell out of it. I never got it through. So I just popped it back on the needle just as quick as I could, and so I don't have to go get my crochet hook to fix the stitch. So I'll knit the stitch again, get my needles caught, and then continue on with my bind off. And this is the most common bind off method. There are many different methods to bind off that can be more stretchy. I'll show you the difference, or the quality of the stretch in this one here in just a second. But when you get to the last stitch, now this is the second to the last stitch. When you get to the last stitch, you want to make sure you come to insert this stitch knitwise instead of, don't go in purlwise. You want to go in knitwise. So you want to come to the left side, make sure you go into the left side of the needle of the stitch underneath the needle just the same and knit that stitch, and then take that back stitch and put it over the front just like always. You kind of get this little bit of a gap that has developed here, but what you're going to do is cut this yarn with a long enough tail that you can weave it in and then cinch it tight. I'm not going to cut my yarn right now, but I'm going to cinch it tight. It kind of has a little bit of a gap, but you can close that up with weaving in your ends. Sometimes it gets a little gappy, but I would pull that and cinch it. Pull this cut yarn through and just close that loop up. But I'm not going to cut that right now. What I want to show you is you look at the bottom end or the cast on edge, and it's got some give to it. It's got some stretch. The whole fabric is stretchy. But the bind off edge has less give. It doesn't stretch as much. So this is one of the reasons why people use different types of cast offs or the bind off methods. The I-cord bind off, I've seen that one used a lot. I know that there's another kind of bind off that I can't remember the name of right now, but I wanted to definitely show you how this side has more stretch and give, but this bind off does not. But you see also again how this is kind of rolling up because stockinette has a tendency to roll, and that's perfectly fine. After you finish with your product that you've created, you do want to soak it in water for about 20 minutes, and then what you're supposed to do is wring it out as best you can to get the majority of the water out, and then pin this to either a board or a towel or something so that it's flattened out and maybe just a little bit taut, a little bit of tension on it so that you can block it out so you can remove this roll and make all your stitches show up correctly or be visible, and create a fabric that is flowy and beautiful. That is how you bind off.